Hey guys, welcome back to another video. This is Troy with Cichlid Bros. In today's video, we are discussing one of my favorite all-time fish, the Severum Cichlid. We will discuss how to keep them, a complete care and breeding guide on the Severum, so let's dive right in. So the Severum is a South American cichlid that originates in Brazil, Colombia, and Peru, and they are one of my favorite all-time cichlids for a variety of reasons. They are part of the Heros genus, and there are many different variations of Severums, starting with a few that I've owned for a long time. The red spot gold Severum, or just the gold Severum. The red shoulder Severum is an awesome fish. The males definitely get more blue and red shoulder coloration than the females. This one here is a female. I also kept a turquoise Severum for a really long time. It had awesome coloration. This one was a male. And then there are other types of Severums, like the mouth brooding Severum that my brother Quinn has. It is an absolute beast of a fish right now. And a couple other very common types you'll see out there is the green Severum and the red tiger Severum. So one of the best parts of the Severum Cichlid is just all these different variations, because you can mix and match colors and shapes and sizes with other fish and have a lot of different colors popping throughout your tank. And Severums can be kept with so many other types of cichlids and community fish even, that it makes for a really good cichlid even for beginners. I would say that Severums are a great choice for beginners. Maybe you're just trying to get into cichlids and you want something that has a lot of great personality and color, and these guys are a great choice. The only reason they may not be a beginner cichlid is because they do get big, so you do need a big tank to keep them. Usually Severums can grow up to 10 to 12 inches. Males will get slightly bigger than females, and they will get pretty thick and tall. And due to that big size as adults, I would recommend a 75-gallon tank as a minimum, but the larger the better, especially for keeping tank mates. But another reason that the Severum is a good beginner choice is that they are hardy fish that aren't picky eaters. They're really easy to keep in general as long as you have that big tank. For instance, their water parameters can be a wide range. They are very adaptable, especially tank-bred Severums like most you will find out there. Like most South American cichlids, their ideal water parameters are going to be lower pH and softer water. However, they are very adaptable, and I would recommend keeping your water parameters consistent rather than trying to tinker with it too much and chase those numbers. The main thing would be keeping an appropriate temperature. I would say anywhere from 75 degrees to 82 degrees Fahrenheit would be perfect for them, and keeping your nitrates low. And that means testing your water regularly to make sure you're keeping your nitrates low. I would recommend below 40 parts per million, and like all fish, keeping your tank cycled with 0 ammonia and 0 nitrite, and you should have no issues keeping the Severum in your water parameters. But because they are relatively large cichlids and they will have a good amount of waste, and if you're keeping them with tank mates, the nitrates will creep up, and usually you need to do water changes pretty regularly on this type of cichlid tank, especially because Severums are not a good cichlid to keep with live plants. I've tried many different types of plants, and the Severums have absolutely shredded them up or destroyed them. They will take bites out of even your most hardy plants like Anubias, so you could try live plants, but just be warned that they'll likely become shredded up by the Severum. But because you may not be able to keep live plants, which would naturally pull out nitrates in your aquarium, that's where those water changes come into place. And to know the percent of the water change you may be doing is just to test your waters for the nitrate levels in your own system. And also, because of that size and the waste that the Severum will produce, I would recommend some strong filters. I will leave links down below to what we use. And I'd also recommend an air stone, or in my case I use wave makers in most of my tanks, pointed upwards to create some surface agitation and make sure the water is very oxygenated for your Severum. And then when it comes to the setup inside the tank, I would always recommend more of a natural aquascape to make them feel comfortable. So my go-to is usually sand, driftwood, rocks, and fake plants, just to keep that pop of green in the tank, making it look natural, because you can't keep the live plants in most cases. They can be just fine with gravel as well, but I just really like the look of sand. But the Severum really won't interact with the substrate much unless they're digging out pits for breeding, which we'll get to in a second. But definitely one of the best parts of the Severum is that they are relatively peaceful for their size as a relatively big cichlid. Although there are definitely rogue individuals that you may find, like you would with any cichlid, but the Severum for the most part plays really well with other tank mates, whether it's American cichlids or some community fish or bottom dwellers and algae eaters. and I had a full video on the top 10 tank mates I recommended for the Severum, which I'll link at the end of the video, which goes into more depth on the types of tank mates you could stock them. But just to quickly go through some of my favorite options, the Geophagus is a great sand-sifting South American cichlid, and most Geophagus species will go really well with the Severum and provide a different behavior and color in contrast to the Severum. Another great option is the electric blue acara. A lot of times I recommend that trio of cichlids, the Severum, electric blue acara, and Geophagus, because it is such a great dynamic in the tank with a mix of colors and behaviors, and they're all relatively the same aggression level in the tank. A couple other great cichlids that could go with the Severum are the Walrus. I love these South American cichlids. The chocolate cichlid is another great option, the true parrot cichlid, maybe even the blood parrot. And then if you wanted a mix of South and Central American fish, you could definitely keep your Severum with a Jack Dempsey, the convict, firemouth, Nicaraguan cichlid, rainbow cichlid. Again, just all those cichlids that aren't the massive aggressive type or the really small dwarf type could definitely go with your Severum. And then there's some really good non-cichlid tank mate options for the Severum as well. Things like your silver dollars would be perfect. The bala shark and tinfoil barbs would be good, although you would need a really big tank for them. Almost all plecos would be great options to go along with your Severum. They can maybe be a bit of your cleanup crew or eat some algae that is growing in your tank. And then Severums could definitely go with some community fish like your denison barbs, rainbow fish. Any of your medium to large size tetras and barbs would probably be great tank mates for the Severum. Just make sure they're not too small that the Severum could eat them. Just like most cichlids, any fish that could fit in its mouth will eventually be eaten, so just keep that in mind. I wouldn't keep things like neon tetras or rummy nose tetras that stay really small because they would be in harm's way, although I have even seen that work in some instances. And an example of how versatile they can be, they can even go with some of your big monster fish as long as the Severum is already pretty large. They could probably fit well with an arowana or a stingray or some of your larger catfish as well. Just again, make sure that the Severum is a big enough size that it wouldn't be eaten by some of those more monster sized fish. And as it goes with any cichlids and tank mates you're putting with them, the bigger the tank, the more chances of success you will have. If you have them in a 55 gallon or less, they're already going to be pretty stressed and probably territorial because they don't have enough room to swim around. So just get that 75 gallon or larger tank and you will have a much better experience keeping the Severum with other tank mates. When it comes to feeding the Severum, they are not picky eaters whatsoever. They are omnivores, so you may want to add some more vegetable-based foods to its diet. For most of my cichlids, I give a high protein-based diet, but for any tank that I have Severums, just like Walrus, they need more vegetable-based matter, so I put in some more spirulina flakes. They will eat most vegetables that you put in the tank as well, so just mix that in on occasion and your Severum will be happy and healthy. You could also occasionally give them a frozen food as a treat. I would just recommend doing that maybe once every week or two, just so that they're not overly hooked on that and they still will eat all the dry food you put in the tank, like your flakes and your pellets. And again, I'll put the food that I use down in the description below. And then when it comes to breeding the Severum cichlid, it's not overly complicated, but probably the best way to ensure you get a pair is to get a group of maybe 5 to 7 of them and then watching a pair form naturally. It's not always going to happen if you just put in 2 Severums, a male and a female, but it is very interesting to see that breeding behavior. They will be more likely to breed with a Severum that is the same variation as themselves, but I have seen 2 different types of Severums breed together. A green and a red spot gold Severum, for example, bred in this 180 gallon aquarium. And then when I had 2 red spot gold Severums in my 180, they laid eggs every 3 or 4 weeks, but even though they were laying eggs in that tank, the eggs never hatched because of the other tank mates in there. So if you do have a breeding pair, it's best to put them in their own tank so that they can go through that whole process and the other tank mates won't eat the eggs or disturb them. Severums aren't overly aggressive, like I said, but when they're breeding, all cichlids can be very feisty and territorial. When my Severums would lay eggs, they would defend this corner of the tank and they would be a little more aggressive, but they didn't do any damage to the other fish in the tank. So even though they were in breeding mode, they still weren't the most aggressive when it comes to cichlids in breeding mode. Usually Severums will lay eggs on flat surfaces, so if you have a flat piece of decor or slate in your tank, They will even use the glass panels in your aquarium to lay eggs. So there's not a lot you need to do if you're trying to breed your Severums. Usually they just need to be a certain age and have a pair form, and they will lay eggs pretty consistently, and there will be hundreds of them. And obviously the male will go over the eggs and fertilize them, and then you can see that whole breeding process through. It's a really rewarding experience that I would definitely recommend. And as I mentioned earlier, there is one type of Severum that is actually a mouth brooder, like this one here, and the only difference is that when those eggs or the fry hatch, it will actually mouth brood, and that is how they raise their babies, which is different than some of the other types of Severums. So it's just kind of an interesting difference even within the Severum genus. But overall, the Severum Cichlid is a great choice because of all the compatible tank mates it has, the color patterns, all the differences you could go for. It has a great personality. It really comes up to the tank and gets to know you. They're pretty aggressive eaters, so that's fun to watch as well. And they're just an awesome big cichlid that I would recommend to anyone, as long as you have that adequate tank size, which I think a 75-gallon or larger is definitely attainable for most people out there. So if you have that situation, I would definitely recommend the Severum. But as always, if you have any questions on keeping the Severum, definitely leave those down in the comment section below. We're always happy to help. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.